All right, it's time to turn this table full of parts into a saw. Um, at the OEM gasket and seal kit, that's going to give you a base gasket, a case gasket, and two oil seals. You'll have to purchase the bearings separately. A little bit of shadow there. Let's see if we can't zoom in. Let's say Germany on them. Do not yield to temptation and buy the aftermarket bearings. You'll have more play in your crankshaft with the aftermarket bearings than you did with your wore out OEM ones. Piston's in good shape. You can still see some of the machining ring in there, so nothing hurt there. Caught this before, it was a huge issue. So we'll just try and do this in a couple of little steps and get you put back together. All right, I've already got one new crankshaft bearing installed. Look, you can do this with a heat gun. You don't have to get way overboard heating this up. All you want to do is bring that pocket and its surrounding area up to about 250, 275 degrees. So keep this moving, not burning the paint or anything. Don't anybody get all their panties in a bunch. Okay, right in there on the race. Working your way around. Try and get the rest of the surface. I'm moving the flame around and I try to get it in one spot. Ah, got too close. All right. I'm gonna back it off now that I've actually put some real heat to it. And I just want to get the whole area heat soaked. And again, you don't want to get this too hot. Now obviously it's too hot to touch. And you just kind of get a feel for it. I mean, you know, these propane torches don't throw out a crazy amount of heat. Use MAP gas, that's a little too much. You know, but nothing's hurt here. We're just moving it over, allowing that metal to expand. And I've got a nice cold bearing right here. And then that's just going to drop right in. Once this cools off, and I mean, you can say I can't hold on to it for long, but that's more than warm, but not freaky hot. So got the case gasket on here. Make sure we got correct side to correct side. All right. Here is our crankshaft side. And these are the easiest ones you'll ever do because there's no pressing, nothing crazy. And with all this nice and warm, this just snaps together. Okay? We'll bolt this down, get it torqued up, trim the gasket, and install some seals next. All right, moving right along. We got the PTO side seal installed. Make sure you are flush to the surface and that is even all the way around. I've already trimmed one side of the case gasket. Just take your razor blade and cut away from the crankcase so you don't have to fish out any paper. Feel. Make sure you got nothing right there. Because that'll interfere with how you seat. One little burr right there, and go back. There it is. Now, that's slick as a minnow. This is the easier side of the two to install a seal. I always put a little 2-stroke mix oil on the bearing and on the shaft. this is just a tapered shaft right here, so you really don't have to do much. On this side, you've got a raised lip, so I kind of pre-stretch the bearing or the seal with my finger, and then make sure I get it over that hump just a little bit, and then you can tap it in. Again, this side right here is just going to be flush. So this socket's the same size. Let me let that hang off a little bit. There we go. When you start, just look, go nice and easy. And you'll see I'm a little lower on one side, but not much. I'm going in nice and straight. Keep checking. I mean, if you got a seal install tool, that's great. You do this a little bit, nice and easy. Leaning the socket to one side of the next, and then I'm checking to make sure that that seal's right in there like it belongs. That should look pretty decent right there. All right, next we'll move on to sealing up the cylinder and getting everything else buttoned up. All right, let's take you in a little closer. Didn't do any fancy port work, but what I did was I had to clean out some of the carbon. There was a fair amount in the intake, so I figured while I was there, I went ahead and widened the exhaust port just a touch. This isn't a port work. I did decarbon the top, just use a little sanding disc to get the ugly out of there. A couple of nostrils in there so we can get a little fuel mix going through the transfers or through the strato ports. Seems to help, and that was straight, so I brought that back just a little bit. Maybe we can get a little bit better flow in there. Real simple. Let's back out. Your gasket's only going to go one way. Get on there. All right, see right there? Those tabs drop in. Not using any sealer. They don't use any of the factory. Good enough for me. You can if you want, if it makes you feel better. It is certainly not necessary. You get it torqued down properly, you should have no problem with that, making a good seal. All right, so let's pop this on there and get this assembled. These are great handy little tools. They're cheap. Some of the really crappy brands, I borrowed one from somebody one time, and they don't fit really well. Like if you have, all right, so take this down just a little bit below. I got both rings in their respective grooves. Hold on for a sec. Let's throw just a little bit of lube up here in the cylinder. You don't need a ton. Actually, if you put too much, when you go first to assemble, or excuse me, when you go to pull the cord on it, you'll foul out the plug with the extra oil. You just need a thin film just for lubrication. All right, Butterfinger. All right, that's there. Pop that out the bottom. Drop our fasteners in here. By the way, it took me an hour to get this clean. You still see some stuff, and you're not gonna have a whole bunch of dirt, grime, and gunk. This is 2 sessions of heavy duty oven cleaner. Get all this started before you cinch anything down. And then always torque by hand. These don't need ungodly amounts, but I do want to make sure that I'm getting compression on that gasket so it's making a good seal, and you can only feel that by hand. Because some of these, even though I've tapped them down, hand tightens better. But I mean, if you look, I mean, I still got all kinds of dirt here, but this is 2 rounds of degreaser and scrubbing, and then brake cleaner on the whole surface, compressed air. Anyway, the inside is clean. That's what I'm concerned about. Mating surfaces, absolutely hospital clean. That way I don't have any contamination. All right, let's take a break here and slap the rest of the saw back together, and then we'll do a little bit of test cutting. We already got a before, and here's an after. This is the same day. I'm lucky enough I had a gasket kit and the bearings to get this over and done with today. All right, here we are back again. I just got the top handle just laying on there. What I'm trying to do is, this wire has to be underneath. When we set the ignition coil in here, we're going to have to tuck that wire in back here, and then this shield goes over it and snaps in place. And if you'll look right there, here, let's zoom in and get up personal with it. That right there has to be on the back side. So this will actually snap into place, and that becomes flush. So with that in mind, let's see if we can't get some real progress done on this. Yeah, don't be afraid to jump into these. These are super easy to do. We'll lay that. Well, I guess if I can take my little dust shield off first, I'll have a much better chance of that going in. All right, so there's that. They're even nice enough at the factory to give you, if you're installing one of these ignition coils, where it bends and goes in. There we go. That's nice and straight. We'll start these with a T-handle just to make sure we don't strip anything. And then we can drive them home after the flywheel's installed. Yeah, let's snug this up a little bit. I just don't want this going anywhere. I want to get these connections made while that clamp that holds them securely in place, so they don't get caught up in the flywheel or anywhere else, rubbing on stuff. Is there? Hopefully I'm not in the way here. I think you can see. Get in there. Ah! Of course you can watch me fumble. There we go. Get on there. All right, let's back this off just a little bit. I like to use this 10 thousandths feeler gauge for setting my timing, because your air gap is going to dictate, let's get this out of the way, your air gap. And I've also ground a little bit off the keyway, so I'm going to advance this just a whisper, and All right. Hold that snug. Make sure that's on there nice and solid. And then let's rotate this around. And this will create our air gap in between the magnets. Bring it around here. All right, so you see, there we go, right there. I'm dead nuts on each one of the poles. And then we're gonna like snug this down and then make sure that my feeler gauge is still clamped down in there nice. And something you can put a little bit of pressure on this, not much, just to hold it steady. Snug, a little pressure, snug, a little bit more snug. All right. Now, if this just pops right out, which it's not, you'd have to start all over again and make sure that you've got that perfect gap so you're making good spark but not making contact. You know, business cards are funny, man. You get a nice business card, it might be twice the thickness of that feeler gauge. Okay, nice, nice. All right, top side's done. Let's do fuel tank. We're gonna flip this over. Stay. See if we can't balance that. Of course not. That has to go tucked in. You see how there's a white line right there? There's white lines everywhere it has to bend. Go ahead and tuck that in for right now, and that way that's gonna set in. The fuel tank goes on next. Actually, you know what? Let's do muffler first. It's much easier to do. Try not to manhandle those wires. That kind of self-locates itself. There's some lips on the exhaust, on the edge of the muffler. There we go. T-handle. Yeah. You want to put some decent pressure on those. And if this is your personal saw, then, you know, every couple of weeks I'd make sure that those are nice and tight. Once a week when you're cleaning it up, rainy day, sharpening, whatever. So I think I'm gonna tuck that in and get it secure. These are held in with the longer of the M4s. All right, let's slide this gas tank on. Lift up, that comes up and over. Let's move that to the side. These are definitely going to be, actually, I tell you what, these have to be the shorter M4 bolts, like that. Because if you try and ram a longer one in there, you will dent the plating in the cylinder, and your cylinder will be no good. Ask me how I know. And you got to be honest and own some stuff. Don't just say you didn't know better. All right. That doesn't need a ton of clamping force, and you only have a handful of threads. I'm looking for one more piece of plastic that slides on over that. I must have left it outside while I was cleaning. Yeah, we're gonna have to stop there. I'm gonna have to go fetch that. I guess we can button up a few things over here. Again, that top AV is going to take one of the longer M4s. Okay. Then your glide. Let's do an oil pump. Have to, where'd it go? There you are. All right. The larger hole goes in the bottom. This will only orient one way. Slide that in. I like to hook up my oil line first and then walk this back over. As I said, that only goes in one way, and then I rotated it. We're all human. All right, it's a good time to stop. Let me grab that other piece and I'm gonna pry this back out. Oh, and it just launched. Good stopping point. All right, let's get the last of this buttoned up. I found my last few pieces from where I was degreasing parts. When you install your oil pump, make sure that that slides in there, and this actually recesses, okay? So your bolt holes will line up, but there's actually a raised area that the oil pump sits on. Make sure that it's properly seated and snug in there before you go hammering down on it and getting that tight. So we're only another minute or two away from getting this last little bit, and your oil pump bolts are your short M4s, not too tight. The short bolts don't have very much thread contact, so you're not going to have nearly the amount of you know what, let's oil. We'll put a little dab of grease on the worm gear, keep that wear down. Let's see, we got one more. We got one of those. It's your little cap screw, holds down your ignition wire. AV mount, okay. And then we got our dust shield for the saw. These are also, all three of these are your short M4 bolts. Make sure that's in there nice and snug. And again, don't over tighten these. It doesn't take shit to strip these out. Falling spike. The chain catcher goes underneath the spike. And you can see there's a recessed area right there, and this one's bent just a little bit, but it will seat down in and again. So nice little area right there. She's not going anywhere. Again, a little dab of grease on the needle bearing. Come on. Time to get a new tube. But you know, you can't put, I mean, this is just an interference. Well, this is a slip fit. So it's not like, it's a little booger of grease right there. Let's get that off. We don't need that in there grinding around. Get that oil or greased up nice. The grease lasts longer. If you put oil in there, you know, it's not going to stay too terribly long. Make sure this is the left-hand thread, so your clutch goes on backwards. It tightens as it goes, or as you run it. So, there we go. That's on. Let's get this one little shield right here. You'll have to back way up, push down on this, and then go forward, and then snap that in. Fits like a champ. Let's put our throttle rod back in, got the carburetor on, and it's on the money run. Okay, I'm gonna snap the tank vent back into its place. Choke rod comes out, hook that on. This throttle rod on these older styles is a little bit more difficult to get installed. So if I fight with this, it's not because, but this one goes from the inside. Woo, look at that, just fell right into place. Goes from the inside out. Make sure you're in the run position, not stop, or you'll fight position. Line up your impulse line. Let me take the pressure off of this before I spew gas everywhere. That goes under. Sorry, you can't see what I'm doing. All I did was just hook up the fuel line. So carburetor's in. Make sure that that's in there. It actually, when it seats in, it's in there nice and square. It doesn't bounce around, doesn't rock around. Okay, our tune is going to be off on this because we're chasing an air leak. So it's going to take maybe an extra minute to get it dialed in. Now this saw's got a muffler mod to it, now a timing advance, and a little bit of light performance work. So the limiters have been taken off the carburetor. I still got to put some oil in the tank, and I think we'll leave it right there, and then we'll go, I'll take it outside, get it dialed in, and we'll do some test cuts so then you can see befores and afters, and we'll stop there. See you in a minute. All right, last little bit. Let's I've already made a handful of cuts with this, got the tune dialed in. I call this a success. It idles like it should. There's nothing wonky about it. Behaves good. And so, a little proof of life video. Chain's getting dull. Anyway, thanks for watching. Appreciate you sticking around to the end. But yeah, that's a day in my life of finicky ass chainsaws. I mean, everybody understands, you know, it doesn't run right, how much of a pain that can be, you know, but really getting to the bottom of it and fixing it properly the first time and then send it back out. So that's what it takes. Thanks again.